All right, well, let's begin. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this City of Casey Council meeting on the 17th of November. We are recording this meeting due to a technical delay, so unfortunately it's not immediately live streamed, but it's been loaded up as soon as possible after the meeting. In line with the restrictions issued by the Victorian State Government on public gatherings, the meeting is closed to the public and the meeting is being held virtually, so just to confirm that. I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. The City of Casey proudly acknowledges the traditional owners, Casey's Aboriginal communities, and their rich culture, and pays respect to the elders past, present and future. We acknowledge Aboriginal people as Australia's first peoples and as the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we work and live. The diversity statement. The City of Casey is home to a remarkable diversity of cultures, languages, faiths, identities, landscapes and stories. From our first Australians to our most recent arrivals and every wave between, the City of Casey welcomes and represents all community members and their respective ambitions to live healthy, rewarding and happy lives. We recognise this diversity as our strength and we aim to share, nurture and celebrate it. I'd like to open by welcoming and Simon Horsberg, so we thank you for your assistance. I'd like to move to item 2, the confirmation of the minutes. Is there a mover and a seconder to confirm the minutes of the council meeting held on the 5th of November 2020?
I'm happy to move those, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, mover, and seconded Mr. Belmar. Anything you wanted to speak to, Mr. Boardman?
I'll reserve my right, thank you.
Mr. Belmar? No, we'll move. Thank you. We'll move to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Declaration of interests. I have considered my obligations under Section 130 of the Local Government Act 2020 and I have no item of conflict to declare. Do my colleagues have any items of conflict to declare for this afternoon's meeting? No, and I'm... Thank you, Mr. Boardman and Mr. Belmar.
No conflict to declare.
Thank you. And I note no officers have declared any conflicts this afternoon. I now move to item 4, public question time, and there are no questions having been received for this afternoon's meeting. And before we move to officer reports, I just wanted to share a couple of good news stories with respect to acknowledgement of some of the very significant work that the City of Casey has undertaken over the course of the last little while. And the first is the success that the City of Casey had in winning the Customer Service Institute of Australia Australian Service Excellence Awards 2020 for the Customer Service Project of the Year for Continuous Improvement. That is a very significant acknowledgement of the work of the organisation, Mr. Patterson, Ms. Jen Bedmar and the team at Casey. And it's more impressive because it's in the context of a very prestigious field of private sector organisations also competing for this award. The customer experience strategy outlines Council's aspiration to be a council who is understanding, responsive and connected to the community. And the specific goal is to ensure that the customer's experience is more positive more often. And can I say that I think this is an aspiration that I do see very significantly fulfilled. And I do wish on behalf of the panel to congratulate those involved. It is in fact Casey's 4th win in a row at these particular awards. So that acknowledgement is ongoing and welcomed. And then more recently, the City of Casey has had 3 project wins at the Keep Victoria Beautiful 2020 Sustainable Cities Awards, which were held last week. The City of Casey won the Energy Award for the Casey Arc Energy Savers Program, the Litter Award for its Bollard Camera Initiative, and was highly commended in the Environment Awards category for its Integrated Water Management Program. And these awards recognise and celebrate the positive actions taken by communities in urban areas to protect and enhance their local environment. So these projects, again, are an acknowledgement of Council's very strong commitment to delivering innovative projects that provide environmental benefits, cost savings, and enhance our city today, but also protect our city for the future. So once again, I do, on behalf of my colleague administrators, congratulate Glenn Patterson, our CEO, and his team for the considerable work that they do, which has been acknowledged by those award programs. So well done and thank you. I now move on to item 5, officer reports, and the first report is item 5.1, the quarterly community report. Do I have a mover for that report?
Yes, I'll move that.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar, and seconded, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar, I invite you to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Chair. The quarterly report, which outlines the work that has been done by Council in delivering services in the June to September quarter, is being published as part of this meeting. I commend the report to the members of the community. In reading the report, what I take away from it is the ongoing work of Council and the continued delivery of services in a COVID-impacted environment. The work of Council is certainly not stopped, and this report is confirmation of that the continued work and the continued undertaking of all Council staff. I just want to reflect on a couple of issues, and I'll do that fairly quickly. There are two. The first is that the report confirms that the services that Council are offering, not only to do with the construction of buildings and the construction of roads, but also with the continued work in the community with respect to, for example, the delivery of a leadership program, which is a project that's being undertaken by Council, and I commend that project to the community. It's a project that is currently underway, and it is one by which Council seeks to give community members the opportunity to be involved in identifying leaders and being involved in the leadership program. The second thing I'd like to reflect on is the continued delivery of infrastructure, and in particular, there are a number of sites that are being delivered in this quarter. A men's shed known as a Sydney Pargater men's shed in Endeavour Hills, and also the Frog Hollows Rugby Reserve. And in particular, I'd like to mention the Frog Hollows Rugby Reserve because that's a project in which a rugby pavilion is has been completed and will be available for the community as part of the return to a new COVID normal. And in particular, that rugby pavilion will include facilities for the participation of women in sport. And I say that as a Council continuing to do its work to confirm that opportunities to participate in sport are offered to a diverse community. And so for those reasons, I commend the report and I commend the authors of the report who have prepared a report that is well set out and easy to follow.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman.
Thank you, Chair. If I could echo Mr. Belmar's sentiment insofar as complimenting the authors and the Council staff involved in not just what is a very detailed and thorough and high quality report, but the robust nature that we are adhering to our obligations, not just under Section 97 of the 2020 Local Government Act, but also Section 55 and Section 57, which I'll come to in a moment, but to provide such a detailed analysis of our achievements against our corporate plan, including the transparency and the detailed information related to our financial position. There is a statutory obligation to do this. There are various ways that this information could be depicted, but to provide such a clear, concise yet detailed analysis of the Council's performance, it really is a tribute to all those involved, and we encourage all members of the community to read it and to reference any further queries and/or any follow-up information to ourselves so we can remain abreast of our obligations under our quarterly reporting framework. It is worthwhile noting that Section 55 of the Act, in addition to our disclosure requirements under Section 97, particularly as it relates to the community engagement policy, and also Section 57 under the public transparency policy, provides guidelines around what the level of information. But I think what you'll see in the detailed analysis that this report presents is that we've actually exceeded our statutory obligations. This is part of the reform that all of us as administrators and the council as a whole has undertaken to ensure we are not meeting just our requirements at a business as usual basis, but we are exceeding them. And we are very motivated and committed to further achievements and reform in this basis. And you will see further announcements coming up in future council meetings around this basis. So this is yet an example of how we are improving all of our aspect of our public reporting and transparency to be the exemplar across the local government sector. Finally, Chair, I just want to make one reference to a point that you have made in your opening comments in regards to the beneficiary that Casey has been under the Victorian Government's Working for Victoria Fund with the recruitment of 199 new roles. And we commend the state government for providing such significant economic stimulus to the municipality, in addition to commending the Commonwealth Government also on the significant funding, additional funding that they have provided the Casey on infrastructure and other capital works that will be reflected in future reporting. But as we are currently in a recruitment process for 199 new positions, we do encourage applications from particularly those individuals who are in the job seeker environment, who are local residents, to review our careers website and apply accordingly, and to use this as a basis of not just ensuring that we have local people active in council operations, but we are providing direct support to those who do need it at a very challenging time. And that, combined with other funding that both the state government and the Commonwealth Government provided, is very welcomed. Equally provide further economic stimulus to local service providers, particularly as they relates to trades, builders, road developers and other contractors and individuals involved in council service provisions. But it is very welcome and thankful and reflected in our reporting framework. And can I say that there is much more to come. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Belmar.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Before I put that motion to the vote, I'd just like to add a couple of comments. And thank you for mentioning the Working with Victoria staff that are being recruited. I do participate in the induction program of new staff, and I met a number of those new staff last week at induction. And can I say it is hard to put into words the enthusiasm that those particular people have for the opportunity they're being given for the roles that they're undertaking, which are very, very diverse roles. So I do congratulate the executive team for thinking through the diversity of applications that have led to those opportunities for those individuals. You know, they are life-changing opportunities for some of those people, and that was expressed by a number of them at induction the other day. I'd also like to note the quarterly community report, as both Mr. Belmar and Mr. Boardman have outlined, is extensive in its detail and coverage of council's activities. Combined with our annual report, it is a very rich platform of information that people in the community can access in terms of the activity, the services and the operations of the council. So I certainly, whilst some people may not regard it as bedtime reading, I think it is very informative in terms of what the council does, what the diversity and dimension and value of the services that and the capital works that council provides. So I highly recommend people that are listening and interested, and by listening and interested to the live stream, using the opportunity to spend some time and read through the quarterly community report and the annual report from time to time. Thank you for that, and I'll put that motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. Now move to item 5.2, the Emergency Management Planning Reform Implementation. Do I have a mover?
Yes, I will move that, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman, and a seconder.
I'll second that.
Mr. Belmar. Mr. Boardman, please, I invite you to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Chair. This is an administrative report with 4 recommendations, which are consistent with the new statutory provisions under the Emergency Management Legislation Amendment Act of 2018. Unfortunately, it still is fresh in many Victorians' mind of the tragedy of Black Saturday and the bushfire royal commissions and the learnings that were placed by the Commissioner to the Minister of Emergency Services on better emergency management preparation and responsiveness following these tragedies. We are learning firsthand that a number of those provisions are being enacted as a consequence of the policy response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and how emergency management blends with public health policy response and ensure there is synergy and consistency with all the resources and services that are applied at the various levels. This legislation is a reform of a number of those services and provides greater clarification and consistency to council, particularly as it relates to municipal service provisions. Casey is certainly not immune from emergency services requirements and natural disasters. We have bushfire-prone areas to the north of the municipality, in the Arkaway Hills and so forth, and also in the south near Western Port and Canners Creek, Blind Bight and Warneet. And a number of our agricultural areas also have potential bushfire propensity, considering some of the experiences we've had in the past. The definitions are quite broad as it relates to an emergency situation and emergency response. The key reforms are that we have to establish a new municipal emergency management planning committee. We need to recognise the role of the municipal emergency management officer, and we also recognise the role of the municipal recovery manager pursuant to the various provisions in the Emergency Management Legislation Amendment Act that are contained within the public report. Overall, as I said, it provides clarification around the roles and responsibilities and the escalation points for what would be required in a municipal context. And to put that relatively simply, it could be anything from accessing municipal facilities such as recreational facilities for emergency management headquarters and command centres. It could be providing council facilities for emergency housing or any emergency hospitalisation or medical treatments, or accessing council roads or any transport provisions, or changing bylaws to ensure that necessary responses are streamlined with what the principles and the requirements under the Act are. So whilst very administrative in nature, it is quite an important amendment that will better prepare the municipality for, unfortunately, what will be these type of instances in the future, and to ensure that there is that consistency and streamlined responses with all of the various roles and responsibilities from Victoria Police Fire Service of Victoria, the State Emergency Services Council, the Ambulance Service and other provisions articulated clearly, coordinated, not duplicated, and in the best interest of providing the best possible response to the community in such devastating and trying circumstances. So I commend the officer's report and the amendments that the council needs to undertake to ensure we meet our statutory obligations.
Thank you, Mr. Boardman. Mr. Belmar.
Yes, if I can very briefly join with Mr. Boardman in reflecting on the fact that although this is in part a procedural motion, in many ways it reflects the reality that we've lived through at the moment, that it's in real world opportunities that we learn and improve emergency management. Through the tragedy of Black Saturday, we learned that we need to continuously improve our response to emergency management, and through the motion such as this, we also reflect on the fact that as a local council, we have particular expertise and particular services that we can offer our local community in times of crisis and in times of emergency. And a motion such as this, as I read it and as I reflect on it, is more than a list of some new acronyms, which sometimes a new policy like this might look like. But in reality, what it is doing, it is streamlining and continuously improving emergency response work and ensuring that there is clarity as to responsibility and clarity as to lines of communication. And if we've learned anything over the last decade, that is the key to emergency responses. It's always ensuring that there is clarity before the emergency occurs, so that everyone is clear about the responsibility that they will have. And this piece of work we're doing this afternoon is part of that continuous task, and I commend it to the community and to council.
Thank you, Mr. Belmar. And again, just to note, this does highlight one of the very important roles that local government does play in working with other authorities in response to emergencies and supporting the community through those emergencies. Thank you, both of you, for those comments. I now put the motion to the vote. All in favour? Carried. That's the conclusion of officer reports for this afternoon. We have a number of other items, and that's item 6, consideration of reports of committees. And I simply note the record of discussion as listed in the agenda papers. Item 7, petitions, and there are no petitions received for the council meeting this afternoon. Item 8, urgent business, and there are no urgent business items for this council meeting. Item 9, closed council. There is no closed council item to be considered this afternoon. And so that leads me to item 10, which is the close of the council meeting this afternoon. And I thank you for your participation, and I thank you for your attendance. Good afternoon.